So welcome to today's State of the Industry panel. We're focusing on law and public policy today, and we have four very exciting guests with us to talk with you about their experiences and share some insights into what's happening in their worlds at this current interesting time. So if you haven't already, if you want to change your video settings, go ahead and do so that you'll only see people on video. That's your preference. You can submit questions for the panelists for Q&A time by using the group chat. I'll be facilitating the group chat function, and if you're interested in coming on video to ask your question, if you want to just note that when you pose it, and then I'll invite you to the screen to ask your question of the panelists at an appropriate time. I'll start off our panel with a couple of questions, so you've got a few minutes to come up with some to pose in the chat. But again, welcome. My name is Kristen. I'm the Director of Career Services, and we're really glad that you're here to hear from our outstanding panelists today. So with that, I will ask our panelists to introduce themselves. And I think we'll go in alphabetical order, maybe by first name. We do have another panelist who will be joining us shortly, Tammy. So for right now, I think we'll start with Megan. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and maybe tell us, a little bit about where you're working, and we'll move on from, oh no, I'm sorry, I've got the order wrong, alphabetical, but we'll start with Megan anyway.
Happy to start, no problem. Hi everyone, I am Megan Devlin. I am a 2014 Ithaca grad. I studied communication management and design at Ithaca in the Park School, and was involved with the Ithacan for all 4 years of my time at Ithaca. I pivoted out of journalism and more focused on the strategic communication space, but stuck within media before I transitioned to where I am now. I head up communications and marketing for a nonprofit diplomacy center in Washington, D.C. called Meridian International Center. And we've been around for 60 years with the fundamental mission of strengthening the engagement between the United States and the world by bringing together leaders in governments, business, policy, and culture to collaborate on solutions to global challenges and opportunities. And so my role is very much in the vein of doing all the strategic communications work around that. I wear a lot of the marketing caps and promote our programs, our mission, our initiatives, the brand, but I also have a huge role internally and make sure that I'm supporting organizational operations and working with, HR on making sure that staff feel like they have the best onboarding materials and that they know our values and our messaging, and working really closely with leadership on a lot of critical communications that goes on, especially in the last couple months. I was heading up a lot of our crisis communications support amid the pandemic and the shift. So it's a bit about who I am and what I do currently. This is my view from my room in Washington, D.C., in my apartment, where I still currently am today.
Wonderful, thank you, Megan. Josh, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Josh Elliott, graduated '06 from Ithaca with a sociology degree. I actually lived in Ithaca for a couple of years after I graduated and ended up moving to Virginia with 3 guys who were in my class, one of whom had been our class president, and he went directly into politics, and I was getting interested at that point about politics. And so in '09, I lived in Virginia and worked on a campaign down there for a state house race, with which we got absolutely annihilated. And I said, all right, I'm taking a break from politics indefinitely. Moved back to Connecticut, where I grew up, and ended up getting to the family business. We own a couple natural food stores. And then I ended up also going to law school, to Quinnipiac Law in Hamden, and became a barred attorney, never practiced, opened up my own business, a natural food store, and ended up getting really involved with the Sanders 16 campaign, and did a lot of work for about a year on that campaign, met a lot of labor, met a lot of third-party activists and general enviros and good folk on the ground. And so when the Sanders campaign ended, I was approached by Working Families Party, which is a very labor-backed party, and starting to turn into more of the progressive left party. And they asked me if I would primary the Speaker of the House, who represented my district from the left. Ended up saying yes. and he dropped out and decided not to run for his 9th term. And it was me against the town. I worked it, had a couple of years worth of political campaigning experience behind me. Was able to win that race, won my general pretty handily, and have since gone on to get reelected. And I'm in my my 2nd reelection cycle, and that will be in November to go for my 3rd term. And I love it. It's great. I'm one of 151 state reps. We have 36 senators, and I represent 24,000 constituents. I represent Hamden exclusively. I have 2 Hamden colleagues, and it's been fun. So happy to answer whatever questions you all have.
Thanks, Josh. And Tammy, welcome. If you want to introduce yourself, we were going in alphabetical order, but I mixed up the order at first, but we're on to you next.
No worries. I guess I am next alphabetically. Hi, I'm Tammy Mayberry. I apologize. I actually had a meeting with my boss right before this, so I was jumping on a little late. Class of 1997. I am currently working for the state of New York with Empire State Development, which is the economic development arm of the state. For those who are still in New York State, we're actually working on the reopening plans and working with the school districts and working with businesses and other entities to help kind of ease their transition back after everything that's happened with COVID. By way of background, I also lived in Virginia for about 20 years.
Cool.
I worked in DC, working on two presidential administrations, as well as working for the city of Chicago doing federal affairs in DC, basically being the lobbyist for Chicago. So I have kind of a unique background in that I've worked for both city government, state government, and federal government. So my psychology major did not actually get me here. It was more my legal studies and politics minors. So that's about it.
Thanks, Tammy. Tom?
Morning, everybody. I'm used to going first with my last name being Armbruster, so I was a little off balance, but Foreign Service officer, retired. I joined the Foreign Service back in the 80s and worked for a number of administrations, served in Finland, Cuba, Russia, Mexico, Tajikistan, and then the Marshall Islands. I was nominated to be ambassador by President Obama and served there from 2012 to 2016. And I'd love to talk to you about the career and the different career tracks that we've got, because if it's not something you've thought about, I think the bottom line is, if you're interested in global challenges, and if you're an idealist, I'm, obviously, if I had a beard, I'd be the gray beard of the bunch, but it's a job for idealists. If you think that you want to change the world, you want to do some good in the world and learn languages, travel, and be involved in a lot of often high-level things with presidential visits and so on, it's a great career. So I'm hoping people who've maybe not thought about the State Department or about Foreign Service careers hear me talk and think, oh, maybe that is something I'd like to do. The test is free, so I would say take it, and stay in touch if it's something you'd like to pursue.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for making that offer, Tom. So before I ask the next question, I just want to encourage the students who've joined us, if you have questions, to go ahead and start putting them in the chat. I will ask the next one, though, of each of our panelists, if you want to each maybe take a few minutes and talk about what your current perspective is on how things are impacting your work and your organization and your mission. There's a lot going on in the world today, and part of the focus of the State of the Industry series is to get a sense of what's happening, what are you seeing, what trends, and anything else you feel like would be relevant to share with students as they consider career opportunities in the future in your work or in your line of work. So anybody can jump in. We don't have to go in any particular order. If anybody wants to start us off.
I'm happy to go first, since I kind of mentioned it in my introduction. As I mentioned, I work for Empire State Development, so our focus has shifted a lot. We still do economic development, but it's more of how do we restart the state, as opposed to how do we jumpstart the economy for people who want to come from other states. Ideally, what we have done in the past is kind of be a incentivizer. I hate that word, but incentivizer for companies who are based elsewhere. So if they're based out of state and they want to come to New York, our team works with them to provide tax incentives, grants, loans, things of that nature to relocate here or to have offices here. In light of COVID, we still do that, but our focus has changed a little bit. We've worked with people who are providing PPEs not only to New York State, but to other states as well as working with folks, like I said, to reestablish their businesses, to reopen and work through the steps to reopen. So we still have kind of the same basic necessity, but we've also worked to kind of evolve in the days of Corona.
Well, I'll jump in about the State Department. Certainly, we're still doing diplomacy, but they did cut back on the inspections. I've been working for the Office of the Inspector General and have led inspections to Colombia, Chad, Mauritania, a couple of other countries, and that pace has slowed down now. So at the moment, I'm on contract but don't have an assignment. I would say something else too, just about the political climate, without getting too political, that this administration has kind of pushed the boundaries for a lot of people in terms of their philosophy. So for example, one of my colleagues was in Estonia and disagreed with the Trump policy on NATO and resigned. And I think I've seen that more in this administration than in others. You know, I've worked for Republicans and for Democrats, and there's sort of a steady foreign policy usually, but I think it's safe to say that this administration has made it more difficult given their stance with international organizations and just kind of radical difference compared to other administrations.
Yeah, I could piggyback on that a little, just given that we similarly, Meridian, nonpartisan organization that's worked across all administrations the last 60 years. And what's interesting is like we're seeing that there's still this same kind of hunger and knack to connect. Meridian has been known as a convener, bringing together those different audiences I previewed a bit in my intro of having leaders in different governments, business and policy really come together and discuss solutions to some of the issues that don't, that can't really be solved outside of the respective sector silos. But we had to flip pretty quickly. A lot of the core of what we do is in-person relationship building. We connect people. We have a beautiful former ambassadorial residence that we host as our venue to bring people together, international visitors from out of country. All of that stopped in March once there were, travel restrictions. And we are doing all of our programming virtual through the end of the year. We pretty quickly flipped to doing about 95% in-person work. That includes our staff. There are some people on our staff who have never teleworked in their life. So that was a big internal, hurdle to get over, as much as it was externally figuring out how do you bring your programming to a completely virtual space and keep it as dynamic and engaging and build in some of those elements that we're really known for, our trust and credibility in providing safe spaces. Not everything we do is open to the public or on the record. A lot of it's on background or under Chatham House rules as we kind of go by. But we were pretty successful in doing that. We were producing a couple programs a week in between March and July. We're really lucky to kind of be resuming in DC. August is typically a slow period. A lot of people leave town on vacation. It's quiet. There's a lot of recess in Congress. And we're trying to honor that because I think everyone has experienced different balances of, right, what's your work-life balance? How much do you step away from the screen and continue working, or vice versa? A lot of people have home and family obligations that are, conflicting with work now. And we're trying to take a little bit of an August pause and not be so robust in our engagement. But the hunger's there, the knack for connection is still very, very ripe. And we're trying to lean into that and bring together people who are responding to these moment-to-moment changes that I feel like the pace of 2020 has been, even though we've all been homebound, it feels like a year has flown by in a few months. So my role is really just trying to stay on the pulse of what's happening in the news. I think that's putting on my communications cap, and where my role bridges with the policy and kind of what's happening, both domestic politics and foreign policy and other news, trying to engage leaders. And it's interesting to be kind of on a panel with two, I would say, people who represent local and state leadership that were, really in the last couple of years, we've seen how, governors and mayors are truly becoming new ambassadors for their states and cities. And how do you engage American leaders at different levels to help bring to light how our federal system works, and to get international audiences tapped into the labyrinth of democracy that our country is, and the ways in which we work. So it's interesting. It's all still there. We haven't, taken, we've obviously had some economic hits like a lot of other organizations, but most of our funding comes from government or the private sector, and we haven't lost much. So it's been okay. Just a lot of adaptations.
So our legislature is a part-time legislature. So in our 2-year terms, the first year is considered the long year, and that is because we come in January, late January, we leave early June. And that is the year that we pass our budget, and it's a biannual budget. And that is expected to take a bulk of the time, and it does. And then the next year is the short year, the short session. We come in generally in February, leave sometime in May. So it's a couple months shorter. This year, because of the pandemic, we did not have session this year. Other states figured out how to do it. There wasn't the drive with leadership to figure it out, but we did just come back into session for 3 days, just about 2 weeks ago. We dealt with 4 topics. We dealt with absentee ballots to ensure that people could vote safely. We dealt with police accountability and making sure that we're protecting Black and brown lives in Connecticut. We dealt with the cost of insulin, and we now have some of the best insulin protection in terms of rates across the US now. And we dealt with expanded telehealth coverage. And so we were able to do some pretty good things in that short span, but we did not get a full session year in. And so that meant a lot of things that we had been working on just went by the wayside, and we have to sort of see what happens in November and how many allies we have within the caucus and what happens just generally in both chambers. And the way that my job very specifically has changed is that when we're in session, there's always constituent work, but I'm really doing a lot in terms of building relationships with folk in the building. And because we weren't passing laws this year, and so actually as a side, for session, those 3 days, we actually ended up voting from the legislative office building. So instead of going into the chamber, we were able to vote from our computer within our office, which I loved. I don't think it's going to be a permanent solution, but it was our workaround, and it's our workaround most likely for the foreseeable future. But one thing that's changed is due to the number of unemployment claims. We are doing way more in terms of constituent services than we would normally. So it's not necessarily that the work is more or less, because when you're elected, it can be however much time you want to put into it is how much time you put into it. And you're sort of expected in Connecticut to have a full-time job along with being a legislator, because we get paid $28,000 a year. And in Connecticut, where cost of living is high, it's hard to make those numbers work. And so you're not really expected to be doing everything all the time when it comes to politics, but if you want to, you certainly can. So a lot of my work has just been fielding calls, fielding emails, making sure that people are getting their checks and making sure that they're staying afloat, dealing with the Department of Labor. And that's how my job has changed. And also, given that this is an election year for me, there's always the question of what's that going to look like? How do you campaign when you can't make direct voter-to-voter contact? But one thing that I found is that as of Connecticut right now is doing just about the best in the country in terms of infection rates. And so what I found going door to door is, I'll stand 10, 12 feet back with my mask. I think that people are homebound for so long and aren't getting the level of in-person interaction that they would normally, no one's really complained. So it's actually felt fairly normal, apart from the 90-degree weather with a mask on. So that's how my position and my role has changed. And you know, we roll with the punches, but certainly by next year, if we end up encountering a second wave, you know, we can't indefinitely postpone sessions. So we're definitely going to have to figure out a way, large scale, to actually make sure that we come back and start passing the bulk of the laws that we need to pass.
Great, thank you, everybody. And Josh, I think you've probably summed up what a lot of people are feeling like these days, where we have to kind of roll with the punches and make some adjustments and shifts and figure out how best to accomplish what we still want to achieve in a given week or month. Megan, I think you said that this has felt like the last few months have been maybe like a year, and I've definitely heard others echo that sentiment. So kudos to all of you for continuing to keep things rolling within your organizations and for rolling with the punches. So we have had a couple of questions come in from students. I'm going to ask the first one, and if all of you or some of you want to jump in and answer, that would be great. No pressure if you don't feel like you've got a response to share for any of the questions. So the first question is, what is the process like when you've absolutely not prepared for a career in law and politics? And the student goes on to say, like many of you, my major is not in these areas. So if anybody wants to respond to that, that'd be great. And we will have time for a few more questions if any other students want to submit some in the next few minutes.
I'll take that, or start at least. So I started as psych major. As soon as I encountered neuro, I said, hell no, I want to do something so much easier than this, whatever this is. What's funny though, is fast forward 10, 15 years, and I find all the things that I was just either terrified or bored by so much more interesting now than I did then. So you don't know what you're going to come back to. But I switched to sociology because it was easy. And it just so happens that the professors that I had ended up sparking something political in me, because I didn't grow up in a political household. And it was really through my years at Ithaca that I started becoming aware, through both the 2000 and 2004 election cycle, with both cycles with George Bush. And what I've found for me is that, I mean, soft skills are just the most important thing that you can develop, because your ability to work with people transcends whatever level of expertise you have in a given field, because whatever you end up doing, you're going to be bad at that thing when you first start. Even if you do undergrad and grad school and you hyper focus on a certain thing, until you're in the field and actually doing it, you really have no idea what the actual work is, because it's always going to be something dramatically different. The best you can do by being in school is getting very broad strokes about what the work might look like. And then once you start doing that work, you might hate it. And I really believe that your 20s is just where you learn, 30s is where you earn. And you have to make a lot of mistakes in your 20s. And I went through so many different types of jobs in my 20s. And politics wasn't on the radar. I mean, it was, but not something professionally. Being an attorney wasn't really on the radar. Nothing that I'm doing now did I necessarily think that I would be doing in my 20s. But I can also look back and view every experience that I had as something that was foundational to the skill set that I have today. And everything is cumulative. All the relationships that you build are cumulative. All the skills that you build are cumulative. And eventually you turn around and you've built this really funky array of skill sets from all these different things that you've done that make you really, really good at this thing over here that you just, there's no way for you to know. And so I think the best thing to do is just be really intentional about figuring out whether or not the thing that you're doing is a good fit for you, and not feeling like you have to be stuck at any one given thing. And then just keep on moving forward, and also recognizing that school doesn't stop the day that you graduate, that it's sort of incumbent on you to keep on building your own skill sets through whatever your interests are, and not pushing through something that you're not interested in. And so one thing that was always really important to me was this idea of communication. And at law school, I was the president for the Society of Dispute Resolution. And so one thing that I keep coming back to all the time is just books on mediation, negotiation, arbitration, communication generally. And what I found is that while that was really good for SDR, it's good for politics, it's good for business, it's good for interpersonal relationships. And so also seeing the skill sets that you develop no matter what you do in the way that they overlap different areas of your life, I think is really important too. But this idea of just continuous learning is going to make sure that, you know, if whatever you're doing falls through, you're going to be marketable for something else. So I always have that sort of background fear of, okay, if you fail at this, if you fail at this, if you fail at this, you have this, and this, and you're going to be okay. That's been really important for me just in terms of like my mental well-being, because as soon as you're done with school, life is just terrifying. And there's like this sort of nice flexibility of being in your 20s and being able to do anything. It's also the absolute, probably worst time of your life because you can do anything. And until you start making those decisions and start like following a path, there's actually more freedom and more flexibility once you start following a really clear delineated path, because you always have something to fall back on because you have that skill set too. But the important thing is to be very intentional about your choices and think forward about what skill sets that you can develop. And I'll stop there.
I feel like we have had the same life because I did stick with being a psychology major despite taking neuroscience. But for me, it was more when I went to law school, I went to GW, and I'm sure this is the same at any law school. They only took the top 10% in the big law firms. So it was up to me to decide, okay, what do I do now? And so at the time, the internet was kind of a new thing. I went on LexisNexis and found the one attorney at the time who had gone to both GW Law School and Ithaca College and did an informational interview with him. And because of that, I got my first job, which wasn't in law. I've never practiced law. I've always worked in politics. And it was because of the connection. It was because the Ithaca College GW connection. Granted, being a politics and legal studies minors helped, but it was more that I made that connection on my own based on my interests. I took a legislative behavior class. I think Marty Brownstein is actually retired now, but it's one of the best classes I've ever taken because it gave me a sense of how Congress runs. And my first job was actually writing travel reports for Congress in the Clinton administration. So it's all kind of serendipity and like how you find your way. And I should have been a sociology major, not a psychology major. I love how people interact as opposed to how the brain works.
You missed out. You totally missed out.
I know. That's my one college regret.
I'll give a quick thumbnail of the different career paths in the State Department. And definitely we're all generalists. You do specialize a certain amount. My specialties became Russia as my major, I guess, and Spanish-speaking countries as a minor. And then also a theme was environmental issues, working on Arctic issues and then nuclear cooperation with Russia. But they're political officers who really learn what's going on in a country and are usually the best language speakers. Econ officers who follow the economy. They also do science, environment, and technology issues. Management officers who kind of run the embassies, the rents and personnel. They often manage more people than anyone. And then public diplomacy, which can be the most fun, writing speeches for the ambassador, and then hosting musical events, sports events, things that Megan would certainly know all about in terms of putting people together and making connections. And often sports and music can do that better than just about anything. So, you know, as I said, if you're interested in adventure, public service, it really is a good career for generalists. And eventually you will specialize in some things, but just come with your curiosity.
Yeah, quickly on that, I think that's perfect. And in the vein, I didn't plan to fall into diplomacy. I actually thought I would always stay the kind of media track, just given my background and my interests. I have definitely stuck along the going into communications, staying in communications. But communications individuals and professionals are often generalists. So it's kind of nice that you have this easy plug-in. And I'm somebody who's always valued public service and civic engagement. And I think diplomacy or any type of public policy field is a way that you can apply whatever you bring to the table to that space, because again, it's about participation and your involvement in making your community and your surroundings and society a better place to live and participate and be a part of. So that's kind of my quick add-on to that.
It's really wonderful advice and insights to share. And Tammy, I'll echo Josh's sentiments that sociology at the college was a wonderful major and program. You did miss out. As a former sociology major myself at IC. So I'm actually going to invite one of our students, Quentin, to the screen to ask his question. Quentin, your question, I think, touches on a couple of things that the panelists have already talked about with regard to networking, but they can probably expand further. So feel free to go ahead and ask your question, and they can jump in with responses.
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Quentin. I'm a recent graduate, 2020 graduate, a communication studies major. And my question is, so I've been considering attaining either a JD or an MPA in policy analysis or a dual degree program with the JD and MPA. And really what I'm looking for is to work with state government for some time and eventually have this goal of working as a lobbyist or as an intergovernmental affairs. And so I'm wondering, is one track more conducive for reaching that goal? And right now, I'm currently working as a legislative assistant for an incumbent state legislator. Is school required at all? And can, we sort of touched on this, but can networking really get you to that goal?
I would totally like to take this first, please, because I feel like you're talking about my life. I would say if you really, 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 really want to practice law, go to law school. If you want it as a background, think hard, because $110,000 later, I probably could have done the same thing without a law degree. It would have taken a little longer, but it would have been a whole lot of less financial responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
That said, I love the way my brain thinks about things. Like, I feel like I have a great base, and I could, if I decided to go and practice law, which is something most people in the world can't do.
Mm-hmm.
But again, please know, if you want to practice law, do it. Maybe you want to get a business degree. Maybe you want to get something else. But just know what you want to do before making that time and that financial commitment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll jump off of that to say that I agree with everything. And for me, I'm one of those rare law school boosters, but it always comes with a caveat. So a couple decades ago, law schools started using a foot in the door technique, where they basically started throwing money at people. And the hidden sort of thing to know about is that after the first year, if you're in the bottom half of your class, you lose your scholarship, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
What I tell people is definitely do law school, go to learn, enjoy your time doing it, because it's a terminal degree. By the time you're done with that, you're probably done with school. And so it's like really soak up the fact that like this is your last opportunity to like not be in like the real world yet. But make sure that you're getting a kick-ass LSAT score, because if you're not getting a ton of money. And it's probably better to go to a place like Quinnipiac Law School and get a huge scholarship than William & Mary and get no scholarship, unless you really believe that you can commit to staying up till 2 a.m. every single night, retain every single fact that you have, because by the time you go to law school, you're not with just a random smattering of people that want to go to school. You're with people that have wanted to go to law school their entire lives and will do everything to be in the top 5 of their class. You know, I had 120, or the 120 in the class after me, and one of my best friends was number 5. He just couldn't get a job for the first year and a half. I mean, he found something that kept him afloat, but certainly nothing that was going to make him good money. He's fine now, and eventually, you know, it turns out that, again, the relationships are what matters, and the work that you do is what matters, and not that degree necessarily, and not what placement that you had. But you're going to be up against such competition, and the expense is so inordinate that only do it if you can do it cheaply. Otherwise, I don't think it's worth doing unless it's literally the only thing that you want to do, in which case then do it, and you'll pay down those loans over the course of the next 20 years. I find that for myself as one of the youngest members in the legislature, there is something that allows me to be taken more seriously when people find out that I'm an attorney. Obviously, being a straight white male, obviously there's a lot of things, of benefits that are conferred there. So whatever benefits that you can tack on those benefits, and having a law degree is something that you can tack on. And so it's worth it. And again, jumping off what Tammy said, is that the way that it forces your brain to think in a way that you hadn't before, I think is the most important part of the degree, because it forces you to disassociate from arguments in a way that you probably haven't before, in terms of, everything that you believe you can get very emotional about. But law school, once you go through that process, you are forced over and over and over again of arguing both sides without like that sense of impassioned identity. And so I think that that's, to me, the best part of this, is that it forces you to acknowledge, the strength in arguments that are not yours. And once you have that, that is not just helpful in politics, that's helpful everywhere. And I also find that, especially with politics generally, is that people might not like it, but politics is involved in everything that you do. Politics is involved in your personal life. Politics is involved in whatever business that you're doing. And it's just the ability to essentially work well with people, to push ideas, to give credit, to build consensus. And so both being able to really dissect ideas and being able to work well with people, even if you don't end up doing politics long term, even if you don't take that law degree to become an attorney, what you get from it is applicable in everything that you do.
There was something you just said, and it came out of my head right as you said it. I'm going to get there. Also, location. It also depends on where you want to go. Like, if you want to be a local lobbyist, go to a local law school. I had the pleasure and the displeasure of going to law school in DC. Everyone there is an attorney. Like, you're not special. So if you want, like Josh said, if you're going to stand out, you want to, make a difference in your community, great. But if you want to be an attorney or a lobbyist in DC, you're going to be a dime a dozen. So location is key too.
Well, thank you all, and thank you, Quentin, for asking your question.
Thank you.
You're welcome. See, we did have another question come in, kind of sticking along the career advice theme. The question is, how did you each decide really to pursue the path that you're in and make the decisions between entering local or state politics versus federal politics versus private sector versus nonprofit work? So I think the student's looking for a little guidance on how to maybe make a decision for themselves.
I can start with that. So I think for me, I had this vision of, again, sticking in media. And then actually it was during my years at Ithaca where I took advantage of all the different internship opportunities you could have, learning. I'm a very experiential learner. I like learning on the job and doing different things. So that's just kind of was my way of augmenting my, academic curiosity, as I wanted to experience different professional environments, types of work, etc. When I started really realizing that I could apply my communication skills to help in the more impact-oriented, mission-driven sector, I was really drawn to nonprofits and seeing that there was opportunity to help build capacity and apply what I learned at Ithaca College within the Park School to areas where I was really passionate about, and really helping champion behind a mission and doing something purposeful. So that is, I think, what attracted me to the nonprofit sector. I did a couple internships with different media outlets, and they were great. I learned a lot. I think I really refined my skill set in those experiences, but I kind of always left with this, in a way, to a bit of what Tom shared, is this having this idealist in me a bit, that I felt like there was a little hole in my heart and I wanted to do something a little bit, better, for like good, and try and make a positive impact where I could by bringing my skill set to the table as something I could offer and being kind of an inside, player and creating the change that I did want to see with my skill set. So that's ultimately what pushed me in the nonprofit space, where I've been for 4 years now, just with my current role. But that doesn't mean I want to go back to private sector. That's the other thing. I've also thought about kind of what's my next step, right? I'm still pretty young in my career. I definitely have other ambitions and areas where I'm looking to grow, and I do a lot of professional development on the side. I'm about to start a new certification program, and just continuing to explore interests I have, but figuring out applications while you're in the workspace. There's never, in a way, I found like it's kind of like college. Like even if you have a a career and a job you do, that doesn't mean you can't stop connecting with people and networking and doing informational interviews and reaching out to your fellow alumni about, hey, you have a cool job, can I ask you about it, how'd you get there? So I think you're already all doing the right thing, but I think taking the next step, and if you have the luxury and the time to do an internship in a sector or a field you're curious about, it's a really good way to do it before you lock in.
I think part of it too is just saying yes to opportunities as they come up. Internships really are fantastic. It's a great way to put your foot in and see if you like a career. For me, it was serendipity in a lot of ways that I was invited to live with an American diplomatic family in Moscow at age 17. So I became a gym teacher at the Anglo-American school, and I saw these Americans from all walks of life becoming diplomats. And I thought, wow, I could do that. And I actually didn't join the career until I was 30, which is about the average these days. And I was a journalist for 6 or 7 years. But definitely the experiential route is the way to go. And Quentin, I haven't given up on you. So go to careers.state.gov and have a look and see if that might be something you'd be interested in. Lobbying is negotiating, it's persuading people. And so you've got those skills that would make you a successful Foreign Service officer, a successful diplomat overseas as well. So.
I guess I would say that for me, in terms of how I got involved where, it was just what sort of came to me. That the opportunity presented itself to go to Virginia. I said, great, let's do it. I upended my life because I was curious. I went down there and decided I didn't really love it, but I certainly learned a lot from it. I took a bunch of time off, and then Sanders' campaign rolled around, and I was and still will always be an Elizabeth Warren person, but she was the next best thing in a cycle where she wasn't running. And I had begun to learn a lot about gross income inequality and the way campaign finance is distorting our political system. And he seemed to be the only person who was talking about it. So I said, great, I've got free time. I'll dump all of it into this campaign, and just saw where it took me and just employed the skills that I learned from years prior into this, and organized around the state and multiple states for their primaries. And then Working Families Party approached me and said, hey, we're interested in you doing this thing. I said, okay, let's go ahead and do this. So, I mean, there's just no way to know what the future is going to be. And it wasn't like I was at all calculating about this. I would say before I decided to run, I couldn't have told you who my state rep was. I couldn't have told you who my state senator was. I don't even know if I could have told you who my US senator or congressperson were. So a lot of what I know now, I've learned on the job. It's also made me very understanding of other folk when they don't have a full grasp of everything political, because I live and breathe it now. And I think that what's interesting is when you start getting involved and you start feeling like you're part of that circle, that club, just that, most people aren't, and most people don't have the time to be that involved or have the desire to be that involved. But I still very much have that mentality, or remember the mentality of feeling like I knew more than I did, whether it was about federal level politics or state level politics, when really I knew so little. But that is also a humbling reminder of how little I know generally about everything that's out there. And so nothing about this was intentional. It was always about, okay, what should I be doing now? What's the next thing that's available to me? And just, trying to provide myself with forward momentum.
Same. But I do get a little defensive when people try to talk about things that they don't know about, because I've lived it. So I see it both ways. I get defensive, but then I have more respect for people who don't, know who their local politicians are or their local elected officials. But going back to my other statement, it's literally make connections and make them with the intention to have connections, not say, oh, can you get me my next job? Make connections because they have similar interests. Make connections because they can be a mentor to you. I find that maybe a few years ago, I did a welcome to the neighborhood event at Ithaca when I lived in DC. And folks literally would come up to me and say, so can you get me a job? Like, that's going to turn people off. But if you come and say, like Quentin did, I want to go to law school. Here's my goal. Can you be a mentor to me, or can you be helpful? We appreciate that, and we want to be helpful. So we're open to be mentors. We're open to be, kind of sounding boards. Just network.
I guess I'll jump onto that once more as well. So I hate networking events. I don't do networking events. I don't work rooms. I don't do any of that. What I will say is that that's my perception of myself, and the perception of me is that I'm very good at working a room. But that's only because I've spent so much time in the background building one-on-one relationships, so that by the time I'm in a room, I already know half the people there. So I spend very little time learning new people, maybe one or two new people. And so I read a book and I will just email the author and say, hey, this was a cool idea. And half the time they'll write back. I reach out to, I read in the paper that someone got a new position at this nonprofit that I think does good work. And I sit with them and I'm just curious about, what do they think of the history of their of their organization? What do they want to do with the future of it? Why do they want to do it? What's their history? And I go into all of these conversations with a very legitimate curiosity, because I'm so interested to see what other people's stories and other people's journeys are. And there really is no intent behind it other than just building the relationship. And obviously, can it come back down the line in 5, 10, 30 years? Maybe, probably. But I also just find that once you've chosen your place, and I think that being grounded, and this is sort of what Tammy had said too, geographically, once you've found what your place is and you started making roots, again, there was this big fear in my 20s of like that building roots, of feeling stuck to a place. But it's actually once you have roots that you are freer than you've ever been, because you can travel anywhere that you want. You can go anywhere that you want. But it's knowing people that are around you and feeling really connected with people that allows you to enact whatever it is that's in your head. Because all of this really is enacting your will, whether it's through diplomacy, whether it's through politics, whether it's through business. It's what is the best way for you to enact your will, and hopefully it's for good and not for just selfish purposes. I do think often about this idea of the oxygen mask, which is you can't really help other people until you've helped yourself. So you have to prioritize yourself above all else, and you have to make sure that you're setting boundaries and protecting your time and protecting your emotional state. But once you've done that, all of what is additional should be going back to the community, should be going back to people, and you should be trying to figure out ways that you can be as giving as you possibly can. And so I think that this is an extension of meeting people and just always thinking, what is it that I can do to help you? And so for me, a lot of that is just very interpersonally, with every conversation that I have, what sort of value can I provide to you? Who can I connect you with? And when you first start, the fact is you're probably not going to be valuable. The fact is you're probably not going to be valuable for 80% of the conversations that you're in forever. And maybe that you won't have that. But if you have the mindset of, I believe in your mission, I believe in your journey, and I will do what I can, as limited as it is, to help you, I think that that comes back to you over and over and over again. Because if there's one thing that people who give want to be around, they want to be around other people who give. And so if you start figuring out who those people are, you can develop those relationships. And one thing that I've seen now a number of times and has shifted now in my 30s is that you're going to think that because you're in your 20s that you don't have value to provide, but that's so inaccurate. There is a value as a mentor to work with people who are interested in the work that you're doing, knowing that they will help carry out your mission. And so people are going to be much more inclined and willing to sit with you than you will ever give yourself credit for. So just push through that and know that that 20 to 30 to 40 year difference between you and that mentor, and you and that other person who's on their own very personal journey, is not that much from that person's perspective. I might be 35, but I still have the brain of a 25-year-old. It's like, you know, I'm still like, that's still the nucleus of who I am, with maybe a little bit more wisdom, maybe a little bit more information, maybe a little bit more in terms of what I have in terms of connections. But you should be shameless in terms of meeting new people who are doing work that interests you, because the worst thing that someone's going to say is no or ignore you. But a chunk of the time they'll say yes, and you'll develop a relationship that could last you 4 or 5 decades, and it's worth the time and effort.
That's how I got on this panel. Kristen and I have known each other since college, so there you go. I mean, we're proof right here. And Josh, you're my spirit animal, I think. Like, I agree with everything you say and then some.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, you all shared some really wonderful advice. I think there's some phrases in there that I'm going to borrow too. Josh, the one your statement about givers like to, connect with people who are givers, that's fabulous. It's a really great thing to keep in mind when trying to network. So I'm going to turn things over for facilitation to my colleague, John. We've got about 5 to 10 minutes left in the session. One of the questions that did come through was regarding, oh shoot, I just lost it here. How you navigated grad school and the field without an Ivy background when the field is Ivy dominated. So I'll turn it over to whoever would like to ask that or answer that question, and John will be joining you now to moderate.
Thanks, Kristen. Hi, everybody.
Hey, John.
I mean, I'll take it because I went to a top 20 law school. And honestly, you make your way. You do what you can do with what the tools you're given. I never said, oh, well, my neighbor here went to Yale, my neighbor here went to Harvard. I just said, I'm going to work to the best of my ability and do what I can in law school. And I made it through. I wasn't the top 10%, but part of that was me thinking that I can go through law school with the same study skills that I had in college. So it's all about like how much you're pushed, how much you push yourself, how much, the curriculum challenges you. But I don't see it as kind of a hindrance at all that we didn't go to a quote unquote Ivy school.
Yeah, I don't think it's a factor in weighing the candidates for the Foreign Service, really. In fact, you don't have to graduate from college at all to join the Foreign Service. I went to St. Mary's in San Antonio while I was posted to Nuevo Laredo, Mexico, and I got a master's degree in conflict resolution, and then later went to the Naval War College with the State Department, where we studied basically just conflict. But I think it is, as Josh had said earlier, just constant learning. And the fact that I've had the opportunity to learn Russian at the advanced professional level and to be able to negotiate in Russian, I mean, that's a gift that I'm still really grateful for. So I think continue to learn and don't really be too hung up on where you got your learning, because when people look at your resumes, they're going to go through that in 2 to 5 seconds. So think about what you want to do, the goals you've got, and I would come around again to public service and just how rewarding it is when you help an American in prison, or you see an American business get started overseas and you've had a hand in that. That's more rewarding really than anything. I think I joined the Foreign Service for kind of the adventure and to see different things, but the more I was in, the more it was those times when I helped an American family that really stayed with me.
Any other thoughts on that particular topic?
And I guess to Tom's point too, kind of a combination of Josh's and Tom's point. I feel like for me, going to Ithaca for undergrad was more of a benefit because our alumni network is smaller and you feel more connected to them as opposed to a larger school, especially in Ivy. Like, I felt very comfortable reaching out to a stranger who went to Ithaca. And I don't know if I would have felt that comfortable with a stranger who had gone to a larger school. So use that to your advantage.
I think we probably have time for maybe one more question. That work for everybody? Okay. So the question that I'd like to go with, because I think this will be of interest to a lot of folks, is strategy. It's sort of framed around what strategies or advice might you have for someone who's interested in getting an entry-level position into a congressional representative's office? Any thoughts on that topic?
I feel like these are all targeted to me, so I'm going to take it. I've worked for 2 members of Congress and a senator, so I guess I do know how to get into a congressional office. I would say volunteer. Go into your district office and say, hey, do you need anyone to run copies? Do you need anyone to help with events? And establish yourself in that office. I personally had a network connection, ironically, through one of working for members, actually not working, playing on a member's softball team. So when someone was looking for a legislative director, the chief of staff remembered me from a softball team. So you can do it any way you want. It doesn't have to be like volunteering on a campaign. It doesn't have to be volunteering in the office, but make your presence known. Make sure that, you know, they know of you. So if a position does come up, they don't have to look just at blank resumes. They know you as a person. I think that's the most important, knowing you as a person as opposed to just a piece of paper or a name on paper.
And it sounds like having a home run swing also helped, Tammy. Anyone else want to offer any feedback on that topic? If not, we have one more question we might have time for.
I
Yeah,
agree with
please,
that.
Josh.
Yeah, I mean, so I say the same thing for anybody who wants to know how to get involved in politics is start. Okay, good. That's very nebulous. And once you decide to start, it is, you know, if it's a campaign year, go work on a campaign, go figure out where the office is, go talk to anybody who knows anything and say, who do I talk to get involved? You know, there's someone somewhere within your field, within your sphere of influence that you'll be able to get connected to that campaign. And don't think of it in terms of, how do I get to this person right now and get them to listen to me right now? You are thinking, how do I get to this person before they get elected? In which case I will have their ear for as long as I want and or need. Or you're thinking, how can I help get this person reelected? And so that when they're back in session, I actually know people, so I can get a 5-minute, 10-minute conversation, whatever it is. And some of the time, maybe you don't even want that or need that, but it's all just starting. It's all just saying, I want to do this, and this is the person who I believe in. Local is usually better because you could provide value. You can get your family members to vote for so-and-so. And if a volunteer comes to me and says, hey, I can get 4 votes for you, what do you need? Whatever that person needs for the rest of my career, they got. And it takes very little, because very few people go out of their way to help political candidates, thinking that it's something a part of them, that they could never be involved. And the fact is that to get involved is such a low bar. All you need to do is just show up, because basically nobody shows up. I'll give you one example, and then I have to go, is that I was on the New Haven Green for the Bernie Sanders rally 4 years ago. And this always really sticks out to me, because I was a super volunteer, really motivated, knocking on doors, making calls every week. And I was there with this other person I did a lot of organizing with, who actually ended up becoming my campaign manager, who then also ended up becoming the political director for Working Families Party. And so at that point, we were just volunteers. And so we were going to head back to headquarters as soon as this rally was over. There was 12,000, 15,000 people on the green. It ended after the hour of him talking. We went back to headquarters, and not a single person showed up to do actual work. And so if you're a person who is willing to do anything, you are light years ahead of the vast majority of people who think that being politically active is going to a rally. I think that being politically active is liking something on Facebook or sharing something on Facebook. There is a big distinction between the people that are like, yes, I'm interested, but I don't know what that means. I don't know what to do on one side, and people that are saying, yes, I'm interested, and I'm going to put my time and I'm going to have hard conversations, and I'm going to allow myself to be in a position to be told what to do with things that maybe I disagree with, you know, to a degree, for like things that a campaign manager wants you to do. And so there's a big difference between those two mentalities. And only once you make that shift from here to here that you recognize that this is where the work is, that talking to people that disagree with you and doing really boring work where you're all alone, going from door to door with nobody to give you company. That's the work. It's boring, and 95% of the time, you are not even gonna know why you're doing what you're doing, but that's what it is. It's a lot of that like silent introspection time in between, and then you know maybe you pass paid family medical leave, and you're there on the floor of the house, and it's one of the most amazing things because you've been talking about for 4 years, or you pass an increase to the minimum wage, or you pass national popular vote, and you've been involved in some way in terms of that advocacy. So I would say that, you know, so much of politics is just like feeling as though you're just yelling into an empty room. But there are those times that get highlighted throughout this where you're like, oh, now I understand why I did those hours worth of door knocking that felt like I wasn't doing anything. Because if there's enough of us doing those hours worth of door knocking and getting no immediate response back, that's how you get those big wins. But thank you all. I have to head out.
All right,
Okay.
Josh, thank you very much. And I think we're pretty much at time, so I want to thank everybody who's been on here today. And to see your faces again. Some of you, it's been a while since I've seen you. So Tom, thank you. Megan, Tammy, thank you so very, very much. Yeah, I have one shameless plug. I don't know if Kristen was going to do a shameless plug, but I will. And that's just to let students and alums who are on the call know that Career Services remains open, and we are here to help you. And so we're doing appointments. We are available for whatever you need. So please, if you're in need of help or you need an ear on something, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Okay.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you. And I have a question. We do have some extra questions we didn't get to. Are folks comfortable if people want to reach out to you in doing so? Is that okay with folks?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I thought probably, but you know, never assume, right?
Well, thank
All
you
right.
Thank
again.
you, John. Thank you, Tom
Thank
and
you.
Megan, and all the
Yeah.
students
Yeah.
/
Yeah.
alumni.
Great
Great.
questions. Great chatting.
Great panel. Thank you so very much. And everybody be well.
Stay
Thank you.
safe.
You
Be
too.
well.
Thanks.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.